In what may be the most cringe-inducing thing I've seen in a very long time, Drew Barrymore got on her knees for Dylan Mulvaney. But here's the best part. Dylan Mulvaney, a biological male, is wearing a dress, and Drew Barrymore, a biological female, is wearing a suit. It's just, I don't know, it's kind of funny. James Lindsay tweeted, "Women Plus are taking control. Cis women need to step out of the way, be silent, and know their place." Ah, yes, indeed. Women Plus. I love that. Very, very clever, James Lindsay. But yeah, Amy Therese on Twitter, who is from the What's Left cast, co-hosted a podcast, posted this: "The gender inversion attire is so stark." And here we have a picture of Dylan Mulvaney, a male, wearing female clothing, and a female wearing a suit. Like, I don't care what you wear, man. I just think it's kind of funny. I also think it's just insane that Drew Barrymore got on her knees for Dylan Mulvaney. It is unnerving and unearthly, as Matt Walsh would describe. And so here's this clip. This is a story we got from Timcast.com. Actually, let me zoom in for Yez. Maybe it'll be easier to see here. And it's titled, "Dylan Mulvaney discusses difficulties, experiences identifying as a woman on the Drew Barrymore show. I'm not a monster. I'm not somebody who's trying to do anything but be myself and be happy." Let me tell you why I want to talk about this and what I think. Drew Barrymore, nearly stricken to tears. And I'm just like, what's wrong with you? You know, men and women are very different. They are. I don't care about this. And perhaps that's the problem. And Dylan Mulvaney can do whatever Dylan Mulvaney wants, whatever. And Drew Barrymore can do whatever Drew Barrymore wants to do. But watching this show and seeing this level of psychotic derangement has me kind of thinking, you know, maybe we're going to have to actually step up and start caring about the weird social destruction that's happening before us. That is to say, people like Drew Barrymore don't seem to have any kind of reason behind them. It's chaotic nonsense. It's chaotic psychopathy. Drew Barrymore is like, "I'm just so happy you're here." And then gets on her knees and is like, what it must have been like. And then women in the audience are going like, "Oh my God." They're crying because they're crying. There's no reason to cry. It's like you're seeing women start nearly crying because another woman started crying. What are you crying about? Dylan Mulvaney said, like, "I'm here with Drew Barrymore." And they're all losing their collective minds. Look, people are going to do what people want. And we've all been fairly classically liberal. But looking at all of this, I don't think there's a classical liberal solution to any of it. There is only destruction. I feel like classical liberalism had its time and place when humans were very spread out and shared moral foundations. But it led to a decay in moral foundations, which ultimately leads to a crooked and corrupt society that would exploit and destroy children, which will ultimately lead to the death of that civilization. And so what we need is a true classic liberal or traditional liberal society in that we expect things of you and we expect cohesion. Now, for those that don't want to adhere, I don't think you do like authoritarian stuff with it. I think we just maintain a certain degree of moral expectations in that we say, hey, I don't care if you want to wear a dress and fall to the ground crying and juggle hot dogs. We don't allow that on TV. Things like that. Maybe that's a little too harsh because there's free speech and all that stuff. So I'll walk that one back. What I mean to say is not that the law needs to handle it, but that people need to say outright, no, we will resist you culturally. We will not just sit back. You're certainly allowed to do your weird TV show garbage and social media crap, but we need some kind of system that says, here are the lines, do not cross them. There's a challenge there. The challenge is we believe in free speech, the First Amendment. We believe in many amendments. We believe in the Constitution. But then what about this absolutism that results in the destruction of the very same document? It's a paradox. The reason the Constitution worked is because you had a morally cohesive society. Now you don't. Now it seems to not make sense. The government gives some people free speech and others none. Well, therein lies a problem. We don't actually have free speech. Major corporations will say, I'm a private company. I can censor whoever I want. Great. Then here's what we do. We buy up the networks and then we ban this stuff. Is that what you want? That's the point. The law doesn't need to stop it, but there needs to be an effort to curtail cultural degradation and degeneracy. Otherwise, and I don't care about these people, but otherwise you end up with adult sex shows for kids, Florida doing very little to stop it, Texas doing very little to stop it, and it spreads and it gets worse. Because you have here's how it works. The Democrats and the leftists are trying to run full speed off a cliff, and the Republicans are holding a tether to them, being dragged along. And they're saying, no, stop, don't keep running towards that cliff. Instead of having your people run the other direction and pull them back from the brink, they're just holding the rope and being dragged along. Republicans are Democrats driving the speed limit. Watching this show, actually, maybe I can show you like a clip or whatever of like Drew Barrymore on the verge of like crying because here, let me play some of this.
But what she said to you wasn't what I thought she was going to say to you. What was it?
She said to keep some things private for myself. And I couldn't agree more in the way that there were a few moments this year where I was like, was I actually ready to say that? But now, since meeting her and having that moment, I go, okay, what would Laverne do? And I actually have stopped myself from making a few videos to make sure that I was actually...
I want to point out a few things. The internet creates a lie. It creates a perception of reality that doesn't exist, but reality persists. Case in point, this image. Maybe I can full screen this. It's not as easy to see because of the way everything's framed. But I want you to see Dylan Mulvaney juxtaposed with Drew Barrymore. Drew Barrymore is a woman. She is small. She is frail relative to the large stature, large head, and large body of Dylan Mulvaney. I am not saying that as a derogatory statement. I'm saying factually that Dylan Mulvaney is a larger human being, very tall, broad shoulders, thick arms. I've actually never seen Dylan Mulvaney next to someone else, so it's actually quite interesting to see Dylan Mulvaney next to Drew Barrymore, so you realize Dylan Mulvaney is a large masculine individual. I don't mean that ideologically or internally. I know Matt Walsh is probably saying, no, Tim, certainly this person is not masculine. This is an eerie and unearthly individual who has lost all masculinity in the process of transition. And, my point is, you can't get rid of it. You can't change it. There are a lot of personalities who pass. They call it passing. And you'd be like, oh, that person's trans. You don't realize. Not everybody. Dylan Mulvaney is not one of these people. And I will stress again, I am not saying this as a slight or as personal invective. I am not trying to insult Dylan Mulvaney, though I think Dylan Mulvaney is actually trying to insult people. I think Dylan Mulvaney is the worst kind of person in that Dylan Mulvaney intentionally insults women, intentionally insults trans people, and then says, you can't tell me that because I'm trans, as a shield to be a nasty, nasty person. But I will say, factually, Dylan Mulvaney is large, and there are many personalities that don't pass. Many of these personalities are very obviously large males, and there's no getting around it. Now, Dylan may do clever filters, as Matt Walsh pointed out, and angles, and point the camera down so that Dylan will look smaller on camera. But then when you sit down in this chair next to Drew Barrymore, you can see, I gotta say, Dylan Mulvaney is actually very large. And again, this is I'm not insulting someone by being like, you got a big head or anything. No. Dylan Mulvaney's got a large head, a large body, and I wonder if there's other images you can see. I think I think that was a tighter shot. Dylan's big. Dylan's a big person. I imagine what is Dylan, like 5'10" or 5'11" maybe taller? How tall is Drew Barrymore actually? Let me find out. I'll look that up so we can get a point of reference. Okay, Drew Barrymore is 5'4" and she's wearing heels, so Dylan's probably like 5'10". Let's try that. Maybe I can type in how tall is Dylan Mulvaney. Dylan Mulvaney is 5'9", 5'8". Is that what that says? 5'8". Really? Okay, that's shorter than I thought. I guess with Drew Barrymore being 5'4", but I find that interesting. You can see when you look at the two people, even with Dylan Mulvaney, oh, okay, high heels. There you go. They're both wearing high heels. Okay. Anyway, there's my point. My point is watching this show and looking at the audience. Let me do this here. Let me play this clip.
You starting with
Sitting on the
ET,
floor now.
It was the first
Look at the audience being like.
time I was introduced to film reviews, which are basically social media.
Yes.
But
She's like the whole time about to
I felt
cry.
like all these reviews, and could be a Charlie's Angels, it could be an ET, it could be The Wedding Singer, everything in between. If you read reviews, just like on social media, you are pretty much guaranteed a 50-50. Some like it, some don't. So you've got to be willing to bear down and brace for it.
Yep,
And I
you
think
do.
I
That's
think
a fact.
picking your battles too.
Yes.
And sometimes I think the greatest response can just be in the next joyous video or in the next win that you have, because that just goes to show that like you are continuing on, and whatever that those people are projecting onto you, it isn't actually penetrating.
I think I try to make all my arguments academic. I try not to sling mud or anything like that. I'm not going to come out and say Dylan Mulvaney. Look, Matt Walsh said of Dylan Mulvaney, you're unnerving, you're unearthly. And people are like, that was so mean. And I'm like, have you ever heard, like, I've called people disgusting pigs. You know, like Donald Trump called, did he call Rosie O'Donnell a fat pig or something like that? Like, that's mean. Giving this dadly academic argument that Matt Walsh did is not mean. And it's crazy to me that people say it is. Dylan Mulvaney is a bad person, a mean person, and I think evil. I think Dylan Mulvaney's intention is to insult women and trans people. Hiking heels. People look at that and they're like, that's normal. And then you get conservatives being like, look at these trans people. Trans people don't do that. I say it a million times. That's why I think Dylan Mulvaney's intention is to make a clown show of women and trans people. And it works. And she goes on TV and she sits on the floor and goes, I'm on the floor with Drew Barrymore. But Dylan got surgery, Tim. So did Madonna. So did basically every single clown in Hollywood. That's what they do. This is no different. I don't know, whatever, man. Do your cringe. I don't care. Like, I literally, I don't care if adults want to do whatever they want to do. I'm just going to point out my opinions on it. I think I'm not trying to be mean to Dylan. I think Dylan's an evil person. I outright mean that. Causing pain and suffering and destruction for personal gain, making a mockery. You know, there's a lot of people who do it. Whatever. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up in a few minutes. Stick around and I'll see you all shortly.